Well, I think it's between two subtypes of INFJ, okay? Which subtype of INFJ is the toughest to transcend, to move beyond and into? There's only one, well, at least if we're looking at a trajectory of individuation, of positive development, of growth, of true growth, there is only one subtype of INFJ that you can become. And that's the spiritualized INFJ, okay? I like to emphasize this in every video. It's like, Simone de Beauvoir said, one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. And I want to paraphrase this, appropriate it for my work. In this case, I would say one is not born a spiritualized INFJ, one becomes a spiritualized INFJ, or does not, right? Or does not. You may be of one of the other four subtypes of INFJs, namely the secure INFJ, the compliant INFJ, the solipsistic INFJ, or the spinning INFJ, and remain that. And in fact, I think we can right off the bat say that the least likely to spiritualize, in many ways for good reason, is the secure INFJ. And one might say, is it such a good reason after all? Because the secure INFJ tends to be a more laid back, less of an activist type personality, less proactively getting people together, less geared toward influencing others for the good, like the spiritualized INFJ. But in terms of lack of anxiety, low neuroticism, inner peace, they're doing really well, and they have many of the ingredients of happiness and satisfaction. So I don't think it's a bad thing that they remain secure, okay? But the other three are not secure, okay? The spinning INFJ is not secure. The solipsist is not secure. And of course, the compliant is not secure. So people who lean toward those are leaning toward insecure forms of INFJ living. Of those three, which is the least likely, in my view, to, in fact, progress towards spiritualization? I think it's between two, okay? In the past, I would have said for sure the solipsist, because the solipsist is withdrawn, right? The compliant, in a sense, suffers from too much influence of other people, but at least they're socialized. So if they can turn that around, there's a real opportunity for them to spiritualize. And I genuinely believe that the majority of initially insecure INFJs who spiritualize are compliance. And again, let me refer back to Siddhartha. In the book Siddhartha, the main character who eventually spiritualizes as an INFJ, again, if you want to read a poetic, metaphorical rendering of this process, absolutely read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. I mean, Siddhartha is definitely a compliant INFJ to begin with, okay? I would say the solipsist is more at risk of remaining stuck in solipsism, because solipsism does not really offer a path forward. It's a constant cycle of consolidation upon consolidation upon consolidation of the NI function and the NI world, up to a point where the solipsistic INFJ forgets that there is such a thing as expansion, or begins to doubt that there can be expansion. The compliant INFJ, given that they remain socialized, never lose sight of expansion, even if they're frustrated by their own repression and their own difficulty opening up in their full self to other people rather than their persona. But even more importantly, that's a big difference that I have not mentioned enough, okay? So this is a scoop, this is a first, right? I'm going to mention this here. one big advantage, so to speak, of the compliant over the solipsist is that the compliant is usually aware that they are neurotic. They are aware that there's something kind of that they can really work on, you know, that they would like to change, even if it's very conflicted, even if it's very guilty, even if it's not always working out. They know that there's something they want to change and that they would like to be different in some respects. So that's a real ingredient to actual change. If you don't even feel the need to change, if you think everything is fine, if you can delude yourself into this notion, you're less likely to change. And the solipsist is solipsistic. So usually their view is the only view, right? So much less likely to notice that there's something that they could change, and less likely to notice, in fact, that they are miserable because they have no other standard to compare themselves to. But in this, the spinning INFJ remains a bit of an open question. And partly because we have far less data on the spinning INFJ, because the spinning INFJ, as I've mentioned before, is a kind of recent phenomenon. It's not old. It's a kind of INFJ that is really concomitant with the postmodern world, the era of late capitalism, the era of laptops and iPhones and screens and everything available from an early age, a style of parenting that is much more protective, a relative loss, or at least a receding of the paternal function. It's an INFJ that has a weak superego. And that's not the case of the solipsist. And the question then is it easier to work on calming down your superego, which would be the way to go for both compliants and solipsists, knowing that compliance would still be much more likely to seek therapy and such things, for reasons I've already mentioned. The spinning INFJ has to build more superego, and it's not yet clear whether that is easier or harder to do than to calm down your superego. There's arguments to be made for it being more difficult. At the same time, the spinning INFJ tends to be aware that they're stressed and anxious and unwell, and so more likely to seek help and therapy than the solipsist. So at the end of the day, provisionally, I would still say it's the solipsist who's the least likely to spiritualize. But I say this with reserve, because it could be the spinning INFJ as we get to learn more about this type. Okay, give me a like if you enjoyed this video, guys, and don't forget that I have written a couple books on the INFJ. The one that's called the Ecstatic Soul is my first one, and still to this day the deepest look into the INFJ mind and INFJ consciousness. Want to know more? Get this book at the link below. And the first link below, in fact, is to the sequel to the Ecstatic Soul, which is the Infinite Soul. This book takes the INFJ and his or her mind into the external world. How to lead a productive, meaningful, purposeful, and rich life as an INFJ in a world that we often consider hostile. This is the book to get. Get it today. And as usual, guys, don't forget that I need you now more than ever in terms of support on Patreon. Please consider supporting me for a small amount every month. You help me massively. Could not do it without you. In return, also, you get access to cool perks like the Discord server, the Fourfold, and bonus video content every 2-3 weeks on a topic of your choice. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon, guys.